After a crazy period, car prices are finally decreasing. Compared to last year, most sports and supercars are down by 5%. That might not seem so much, but compared to the market top of last summer, it's not difficult to find sports or supercars that lost between 10 and 15%. The Audi R8 is no exception, but there are large differences between the generations. The latest V10s lost, for example, 8% since May, and this pushed prices down to pre-pandemic levels. The oldest V8s, though, are down by 11.5%, but still 10% above pre-pandemic levels. In this video you'll get an update on the latest developments in the Audi R8 market. We'll first have a look at the current market, then at the price trends for the V8s and V10s, and at the end of the video we'll aggregate everything and conclude. So in short, if you're buying or selling an Audi R8, this is a must-watch video. Looking at the US market, we can see that there's a large variation of R8s for sale. On the left-hand side you can see the first generation. And what is remarkable over here is the price variation. Pre-facelift V10s start at $80,000, but you can also find them for $180,000. The real R8 aficionados know that this is mainly due to the transmission type. Manuals demand a significant premium. If we look at the second generation pre-facelift cars, so these angular ones, we can see that V10 Plus models demand a premium of approximately $24,000 over the normal V10s. But that's not all. Look at the price of the rear-wheel driven cars. These were the entry-level models back then, but we can see that prices are on par with the V10s. If I were in the market for an R8, I would take a good look at these. Moving on to the facelifted cars, we can see that the performance models go for a premium of around $20,000, but that especially the rear-wheel driven models are popular. I am not sure if this is a result of some production issue or just a result of a high demand for this model type. If you know, please share it in the comment section. And with that, it's time to have a look at the price trends. As I mentioned in the beginning of the video, prices decreased significantly from the market top, but this applies to almost all cars, not just the Audi R8s. So let's check out how bad the situation is, or good, depending on whether you are buying or selling. We start with the V8s and then transition to the V10 market. Over here we can see the price trends for the pre-facelift and facelifted cars. As you can see, they are very similar. Between August 2019 and May 2021, prices increased by 20% in the facelifted market and by 25% in the pre-facelifted market. And these increases are relatively small, especially if you compare it to a 911 of the same era. Now, similar to the rest of the car market, prices topped during the last summer and have been decreasing ever since. You can see that the facelifted cars are down by 7.4% and the pre-facelifted cars by 11.4%. However, it is the 11% drop that shows what actually happened. The decrease in the facelifted market is slightly subdued due to the fact that there are slightly more Spyders for sale compared to 3 months ago. You can then also see that the confidence intervals in that market are similar to the ones in the pre-facelifted market. But now then, the question that I get asked over and over again, what's happening in the manual V8 market? Well, it's clear that they are more expensive, but it's difficult to prove that the price trends are significantly different from the automatic ones. Supply is namely quite low in the manual market. Nevertheless, let's check it out. In red and orange we have the manuals. Starting with the pre-facelift model, we can see that the price trend is similar to the one of the automatics. The data point of September 2021 is an outlier, due to a few cars with an extremely high mileage. Out of the two manual markets, this one has by far the largest supply, as there tend to be around 20 cars for sale, so we can rely on this trend. Or well, at least a bit. The same doesn't apply to the facelifted model. There tend to be 4 cars listed for sale, and this is simply way too little to get a reliable price trend. You can then also see that prices are all over the place. We cannot trust this trend. So summing up the V8 market, we can say that prices followed the general car market to a large extent. Prices increased significantly between the beginning of 2020 and the summer of 2022. Yet, the increase was slightly larger for the older cars. But as we know by now, this changed during the summer. Prices have been decreasing in parallel. And yes, from what we can see, this also applies to the manuals. And with that, it's time to move on to the V10 market. Over here we have the price trend for the first generation split by the facelift and pre-facelifted models. Again, the trends are very similar, but the facelift models increased slightly less. Compared to the start of the pandemic, prices increased by roughly 15%, whereas the older ones are up by roughly 22%. But as we just saw in the V8 market and in the general car market, prices stopped during the summer. Since then, they decreased by 8.9% and 12.6%. So what about the differences between the Plus and the normal models, the coupes and the spiders, and perhaps most important, the manuals versus the automatics? Starting with the latter one, we can see that prices are all over the place. Supply is simply too low to get a reliable aggregate price trend. The same applies to the model type split. There aren't enough cars for sale to get a reliable trend for the pluses. When it comes to the roof types, there is no significant difference in the price trends. And with that we move on to the second generation V10s. But before we look at them, if you enjoyed this video, please support the channel by clicking on the like button down below. Thank you. Over here we have the second generation pre-facelifted market split by the base and the plus models and by the 2- and 4-wheel driven cars. I guess you aren't surprised by these trends. It is the same boom and bust pattern that we saw before. Prices increased by 27.3% and 29% between the beginning of 2020 and the market top in May. This is clearly a larger increase than what we've seen before. That's good news if you're a long-term owner. But that's not all. Also the decrease rate is slightly lower. Compared to the market top, plus models decreased by 6.4% and base models by 9.5%. So what about the rear-wheel driven variant? You can see that I am missing some data, but also that it seems to be so that the premium to the Quattro variant evaporated. Supply for the rear-wheel driven cars is low, but we can see that the confidence intervals are fairly stable. Personally, I do then also think that it will be fascinating to see how these trends will develop. In most other R8 markets, supply is increasing and close to pre-pandemic levels. In this one though, it's more or less flat. Does this mean that prices will cross the ones of the Quattro models? Only time will tell. So let's have a look at the last market segment, the one for the second generation facelifted V10s. Things are similar over there, but not the same. Over here we have the price trends for the base and performance models split by the rear-wheel driven and Quattro cars. So what do we have here? Between the beginning of 2020 and May 2022, base models are up by 12.2% and performance models by 10%. And these are the smallest increases across the R8 range. Looking at the drop after the market top, we can see that base models lost 7.8% and 7.3%. Performance models lost 6.8%, so these numbers are slightly lower than in the older segments. Now all of these numbers apply to the used market. If I include the new cars in the same picture, it changes. We can see that the trends are much flatter. In fact, it reveals that prices are below pre-pandemic levels. You see, R8s that were bought in 2020 still depreciated. Over here we can see the price trends for each model year, including the new cars. So the first data point for 2020 cars contains mainly new cars, while the last data point contains mainly used cars. If we look at the price development, we can see that 2020 cars depreciated till mid-2021 and then increased for approximately 1 year. After that the market topped and prices decreased. We know the story by now. Though, what we can see now is that 2020 cars are cheaper than that they were in 2020. Or in other words, the cars depreciated. But the depreciation is delayed due to the price surge. Another important thing to take into account here is that the median mileage was 0 in the beginning of 2020, but now sits at 8,000 miles. So even though that the price came down, the decrease is relatively small if you compare it to the mileage increase. And with that, it's time to wrap up and conclude. Compared to the market top of last summer, prices decreased by 7 to 12%. The older cars lost slightly more, but they also increased more. Compared to the start of the pandemic, it are then also the older cars that are still up the most. Cars from the latest generations are slightly below their MSRP, so very slowly the market is moving from a seller's market to a buyer's market. Is this a surprising result? Not really. While the Audi R8 is a great car, it tends to miss a bit of status when you compare it to, let's say, Ferraris. I therefore was not expecting a significant deviation from the market trend. The decreased rates are, for example, in line with the 10% drops in the 991.2 turbo market and the 8.4% decreases in the 992 turbo market. And if you want to know more about, for example, the price trends in that turbo market, then I recommend that you head over to my channel. Over there you'll find market updates for a large variety of sports and supercars. Can't find the car you're looking for? Let me know the name of the car down below in the comment section. Once there are enough requests for a certain car, I'll make a video about it. As always, thank you for watching and I hope to see you next week for a new video.